I saw you talking earlier about cost of living, and you made the very valid point, I think, to Kieran, that that's going to be the big issue during this term of Parliament. We saw Ross Greenwood there talking about what will potentially be a 0.25% interest rate hike tomorrow. Question Time opened up with a bit of that today. Angus Taylor tried to nail the Prime Minister on just how many Australians might have those fixed rate mortgages, Andrew, that they may have to be flicked over to a floating rate, sometime in the next couple of months. The PM didn't seem to have a direct answer on how many, but let's have a listen to that exchange between those two.
How many Australian households are set to face higher mortgages this year when they move from fixed rate loans to variable rate loans?
We know that this is an issue, and that is why we are doing all that we can, just as we did last October, to produce a responsible budget.
Mr. Speaker, if this was a priority for the Prime Minister, he'd know the answer to the question.
Resume your seat.
There will be an increased pressure on around about 800,000 Australians.
You've got to imagine, Andrew, that the government is going to be pressured on this every question time between now and whenever the next election is. But we saw a news poll today, Albo's fall in 3 points to 56%. Interest rate rises and pressure on people for mortgage repayments, that's a massive, massive issue for Australians. Financial stress and pressure must be just about the worst kind of stress and pressure you can get. How much is this going to impact on the government's popularity and their programs, do you reckon?
Well, it hasn't so far. Well, it has in the smallest amount so far. So I think it's an interesting one because there seems to be a bit of a leave pass for this government in terms of the global situation. People know that it's the same it's worse in the US and UK, in fact, when it comes to inflation. But we know as time goes on, as people's personal situations get worse, then we will see perhaps a turn in the political fortunes. That's certainly the opposition's view. That's their strategy. And, it's the one I'd have as well in their position. And, of course, the R word's what looms large. That's the possibility of a recession. If the Reserve Bank keeps hiking rates, which they're going to do again tomorrow, and people go under. And that was interesting. That question was about trying to catch Anthony Albanese on the detail again. But in question time, you've got notes to refer to, and he got there eventually. But, gee whiz, that's a lot of people, 800,000, who are basically on a 1 to 2% interest rate, about to leap straight up to 5%. And that's a lot of votes too, potentially, Steve. So we'll see. But, I mean, the other thing that people in government have always said to me was that they were quite fortunate, Steve, that the inflation started moving prior to them being elected. Imagine if they had been elected and only then inflation started moving. So then it looks more like a symptom of an economy as opposed to caused by government, particularly when it's happening in New Zealand and the UK and the US. They've been a bit lucky with that, but they're going to have to stay on top of this, and it's not easy. The fact they addressed power bills was important, but they're going to have to do a lot more without driving up inflation. They're going to have to be careful.